This video ranks all of the legendary brawlers from worst to best. Now you may not have all the legendary brawlers, but I still highly recommend you watch to the end of the video so you know which legendary brawler to unlock and max out next. Alright guys, the first legendary brawler we're going to be talking about is going to be Chester. Now the main reason why Chester has been struggling in the meta for a very long time now is because of the RNG with his supers. I mean, not being able to have the consistency with his super can cost him in some situations because he could get a super he doesn't need in that specific moment. Now, even though Chester's supers are very inconsistent and you don't really know what you're going to be getting, something that is consistent with him is the damage with the Bellomania star power. I mean, that's probably one of the most positive things about his kit, so you can actually do more damage to burst down the enemies. Now, before going into combat with the enemies, I really recommend wasting your first main attack so you have your 2 bells main attack queued up next. This will make it so that you will have your 3 bells attack and then your 4 bells attack to follow up, and that way you can do the most amount of damage possible when in a close range battle with the enemy. Now with a brawler like Chester, you want to be getting as close as you can to the enemies because, you know, if you are trying to attack them from a far distance, like, yeah, your bells are going to be splitting from far away and you're not going to really be connecting with too much of your bells. So this is something that's extremely critical when playing Chester because you need to be hitting as many bells as you can. However, he doesn't have a whole ton of health, so if he does get too close, he could possibly get bursted down before you can defeat the enemy. Overall, the amount of pros are definitely outweighed by the cons with Chester, which makes him probably one of the worst legendary brawlers in the game. Alright guys, the next legendary brawler we're going to talk about is going to be Surge. Now Surge had his time in the meta, but ever since the nerf to his power shield gadget, he's just been getting more nerfs after that. Like, a lot of players just overlook him as a brawler that can be played. Now, even though he does have a lot of subpar stats, you know, his stats don't really look the greatest, he can still be very viable on game modes and maps that have a lot of walls because his super will help him jump over them. If players notice that you are walking towards them and they see that you're about to use your super, they can still end up dodging your super in time. And then when you land, you'll just be jumping right next to them and you're kind of just inviting for them to burst you down right there. Now, one of the main reasons why Surge is considered one of the worst legendary brawlers as well is because he just extremely sucks in the early game with his initial stage. If you are outranged and can't charge up your stages quickly, you will end up not producing anything valuable to your team and you'll kind of just exist in the game. He just really struggles during that early game because if the map is opened up, he would just struggle getting his super due to his slow movement speed and his short attack range. Now don't get me wrong, Surge can still counter a lot of brawlers like throwers or other people that are just hiding behind walls because he can jump over the walls to get to them, but just compared to the other legendaries, like, he is just not anywhere close to being as strong as them. Alright guys, the next legendary we're going to talk about is going to be Kit. Now ever since Kit got a lot of his nerfs back in January, I feel like he is probably one of the most forgotten brawlers in the meta at the moment. I mean, come on, one of the strongest things before Kit got nerfed was that he was actually immune to all damage when he used his super onto an enemy. And now that they kind of nerfed that, he can be killed while stunning the enemy, and it basically makes him completely vulnerable to nearby enemies. Now come on, let's be real here. The thing that made Kit the most broken brawler in the entire game for that short span of time was his Yarn Balls attack. With Kit being able to do like 4,000 damage per Yarn Ball attack at max level was just incredibly disgusting. But now with all of his nerfs that he received a couple of months ago, he just doesn't do that kind of damage anymore. Now a nerf that Kit got was that they actually fixed the point where if you use your cardboard box gadget and you still moved around, it would still charge up your super even though it was supposed to only work when you're standing still. But now that the gadget works as intended, it just makes Kit so much weaker since he can't just run around invisible and still increase his super charge rate at the same time. So just kind of process all the things that I just said. Like, he can no longer be immune when stunning the enemies, he does less damage with his Yarn Balls attack, and he can no longer charge a super when moving with his cardboard box gadget. And now Kit's gonna actually struggle even more because he can't get within range of the enemies to charge his super. He doesn't deal enough damage to burst out the enemies when he does get in range of the enemies, and the only brawler he really pairs well with in this meta is gonna be Rosa. Overall, like, Kit is a very overlooked brawler just like the other legendaries that I just stated, and with all the nerfs that he got, I mean, he just completely killed him and it's kind of sad to see. Alright guys, the next legendary we're going to talk about is going to be Meg. Now Meg is shockingly a really underrated brawler at the moment because of how versatile she can be in a lot of game modes and maps. Now, in case you guys have been living under a rock this whole time, like the whole reason why Meg is actually a pretty good brawler is because she can counter a lot of the long-range sharpshooter brawlers like Piper and Nani. So you guys gotta be playing her in game modes like Bounty, Wipeout, and Knockout. If you can manage to dodge a few incoming attacks from those sharpshooter brawlers and then run towards them, there's no way they're gonna be able to deal enough damage to take down Meg. And kind of going back to how Meg is super versatile in this meta, like the whole reason she is because she can counter those sharpshooter brawlers, but also she can counter tanks too. You can use her high DPS from the mech to deal heavy amounts of damage to the tanks, and you can even use your swiping super to deal even more damage to lower the enemies down quicker. Now, it's important that while you're in the mech, you're really taking advantage of that time that you are in it, because you need to be dealing as much damage as you can since you're going to be firing so much projectiles per main attack. When your mech gets destroyed, you gotta be trying your absolute hardest to get your mech back, and of course it doesn't really take long for a mech to charge her super again. And you know what the best part is? Like, if you end up dying trying to charge your mech, you'll end up just respawning in the mech anyway, so it's kind of a win-win situation with her. Overall, Meg is a very underrated brawler because she can counter the sharpshooters, she can counter the tanks, she has a lot of potential in this meta. It really just depends on how you're playing her. Alright guys, the next legendary we're going to be talking about is going to be Sandy. Now, don't get me wrong, Sandy is a very good brawler, but he's going to be more nichely picked in game modes and maps where it's more control oriented. Because if you don't play where it's mostly area control needed, since Sandy is going to be more nichely picked on those game modes and maps that have a lot of bushes where he can hide and sneak around in, he's still going to just be struggling in this meta overall because he just doesn't deal enough damage to deal with the strongest brawlers in the meta like Leon. Now, something that can help out Sandy wherever you do play him is his Sweet Dreams gadget. Of course, it's going to be great if you can manage to stun one enemy, but it's even better if you can stun multiple enemies and then have your teammates help you take them down. Overall, it's just a very underrated gadget, and it's what helps make Sandy that much better to help him fend off for himself. Now, something that makes Sandy extremely annoying, and especially on those bushy maps where people are trying to hide, is like running the rude sand star power. This just makes Sandy even more of a nuisance because if you are low, you can't really run into the sandstorm since you'll probably end up dying. It's just another aspect of Sandy's kit that helps him with area control. Now, kind of going back to the beginning of this section when I started talking about Sandy, like the thing he really lacks in that makes him weak is his DPS. Now, don't get me wrong, he does have a good unload speed, which is great and all, but you still won't see him really being picked outside of bushy maps because he just can't deal with those high HP brawlers in this meta. Overall, even though you won't really see Sandy outside of game modes and maps that have a lot of bushes, if you do play him in those specific situations, hey, he has a lot of potential to really thrive in this meta. Alright guys, the next legendary brawler we're going to be talking about is going to be Crow. Now, I realistically was going to rank Crow a little bit lower inside this list, but the whole reason why he's this high in the meta is because he's so good in ranked, but more specifically the quickfire modifier. He is just probably one of the best brawlers to be playing in the quickfire modifier because he can just gain ammo back so quickly since, you know, the constant poison damage is being dealt to the enemies. And of course, considering he's always been a good brawler for Power League, you know, even though it's called ranked now, I mean, he's still good for ranked, and it just helps him stay somewhat meta. Now, something that did help Crow recently is that he did get a buff to his hypercharge charge rate. What I mean by this is it's now easier to charge his hypercharge, and this can help out Crow a lot. Considering it isn't the strongest hypercharge in the game, but when he can get it, it can cause a lot of pressure and deal a lot of damage if you're connecting square. Now, even if you don't want to be playing Crow in ranked or with the quickfire modifier or whatever it may be, he can still be good on the ladder, but it's going to be more situational and more on those maps that have bushes. A brawler like Crow is a perfect counter to brawlers like Sandy because the constant poison from Crow just makes it impossible for the enemies to sneak up onto you. They are just going to struggle running up to you inside the bushes, and they will never be able to heal up so that they can maintain control and gain pressure on the map. Overall, in this very tank heavy meta, Crow is going to be a solid brawler to slow them down, poison them, chip them away, and especially in ranked, you can't go wrong with playing Crow. Alright guys, the next legendary we're going to talk about is going to be Amber. Now, one of the things that made Amber one of the best legendary brawlers like within the past month or two was her Dancing Flames gadget. Now, even though Amber's Dancing Flames gadget did receive a nerf, it can still do a decent amount of damage. it's still going to be a great way to deal constant damage to stationary targets, or if the enemies aren't really moving vertically to avoid the radius of the flames. And of course, one of the greater things with Amber is her being able to use her super to kind of block off a choke point or cover a part of the map so that the enemies won't want to walk on top of the oil. You can kind of use her super to your advantage, especially if you're using the sticky oil mythic gear. Like, they'll be able to slow down, you can burn them up and deal a lot of damage onto the enemies. Now of course, one of the more unique things about Amber, she has that 1 bar of ammo, and she can do a lot of damage when she has all of her ammo. But what happens when you run out of ammo with her? We all know that Amber is basically going to be useless during that short period of time when she runs out of ammo. So if brawlers like Leon can kind of dodge the incoming attacks and get closer to Amber, yeah, there's no way she's going to be able to burst them down. Now the reason why I'm not going to rank Amber any higher, because even though she is a very good high damage and control brawler, a brawler like Spike is just going to be a better alternative than her. Like, yes, Spike is going to be more consistent and has a better kit in general compared to Amber. Even though they both have good area control, Spike's is just considerably better and his DPS is much greater. Overall, if you're very good with conserving your ammo and using it very wisely when you need to, then yes, you can definitely thrive with Amber. But other than that, there's just going to be better brawlers to play than her. Now the next brawler we're going to be talking about is going to be the brawler I was just comparing Amber to, is going to be Spike. Now Spike is hands down still one of the best anti-tank brawlers in the game to be running in this meta, especially in this super heavy tank meta, even more so in rank now with the big friend modifier. Now no matter if you're playing Spike on the ladder or if you're playing him in ranked, he can be played pretty much anywhere, and it's because of the versatility with his long range burst damage and even his short range burst damage. I mean, being able to chip away at the enemies with the help from the curveball star power while also dealing loads of damage from close up, it just makes him playable basically anywhere. Now of course, over the years Spike has been a very dominant brawler, but something that really shot him up to the top was the addition with his hypercharge. I mean, it's just incredibly disgusting. Being able to increase the super's radius while also getting the stat buffs from the hypercharge is crazy strong, and also combining his hypercharge with his sticky spikes mythic gear just makes it even more difficult for the enemies to escape his super. I mean, Spike's pretty much got everything in a brawl that you need. He's got good damage from far away, he's got good damage close up, he's got a super that can control a part of the map, he has a hypercharge. I mean, he's got everything. So I really recommend getting Spike, going the whole 9 yards for him, because he's still one of the best brawlers in the game. Alright guys, the next legendary we're going to talk about is going to be Leon. Now the main reason why Leon has shot up to the top of the meta is all because of his new hypercharge Limbo. What's so disgusting about this hypercharge is when you use your super, he will still remain invisible when attacking. And of course, the stat buffs that you receive that you can stack with the Invisi-Heal star power makes it so that you can still move quickly but also heal up at the same time. This will just turn Leon into one of the most deadliest assassins, because the constant healing along with the other stat buffs will make him almost unkillable. Now I know a lot of you guys are probably like, Brent, what about the lingering smoke mythic gear? Is it still good? Should I still buy it? And yes, I think you should still be getting it, because it's going to amplify your super that much more. Now that Leon has a reason to be using his Invisi-Heal star power, you need to be getting his lingering smoke mythic gear to extend your super's duration by another 2 seconds. If you do the math, this will help you heal up an additional 2,720 health if you keep your super for the entire duration. Now with the addition to Leon's hypercharge, it's going to make him probably one of the most versatile and most viable brawler to be played in a lot of game modes and maps too. As long as you guys can consistently charge up your super, chain it up, get your hypercharge, go aggro onto the enemies, hey, you're gonna be absolutely dominating no matter where you are playing him. It's very funny to me, like Leon dodged the recent set of balance changes, which is gonna make him even stronger, since all the other brawlers got nerfed. So you guys gotta really be getting Leon, maxing him out, and just pulling him, because he's so good right now. Alright guys, the next legendary brawler we're gonna be talking about is gonna be Cordelius. Now this brawler, I mean, what can I really say about this brawler? I mean, he is one of the best brawlers, if not the best brawler, all because of his hypercharge Complete Darkness. I mean, with this hypercharge, it makes it that much easier for him to catch up to the enemies since they'll be slowed down. And of course, this will end up stacking with Cordelius' increased reload speed and movement speed in the Shadow Realm. plus he will be getting the stab buffs from the hypercharge, so I mean he's gonna be unkillable with his hypercharge. And yes, now that Cordelius has the hypercharge, it's kind of ironic because, you know, he is one of the brawlers that is a very strong counter to those kind of hypercharged brawlers. You need to be using your super to eliminate the strongest brawler on the enemy team so that your team can hopefully capitalize and win the objective. When you have the enemy trapped in the shadow realm, you also need to take advantage of the fact that the enemies can't use anything except for their main attack to take you down. Of course, combine this with activating your poison mushroom gadget before using your super to mute the enemies in the shadow realm will make it even easier for you guys to take down those enemies. If you guys want a more in-depth guide on how to play Cordelius, I really recommend checking out my 2024 Cordelius guide up here. Well, there you guys go, all of the legendary brawlers ranked from worst to best. I really recommend maxing them out from best to worst because, you know, that's what you should be doing, right? Well, anyway guys, if you guys enjoyed that ranking video, I highly recommend you guys go check out this ranking video right here.